The Cleveland Browns have found success under Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry that they have not had since the 1980s. Now, the good news is it'll continue. Both have been extended, the head coach and the general manager. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. And I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd keeps growing, so make sure you're not missing out. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It is now official. It has been bantied about, and I don't think anybody is even remotely surprised. But yet, we were all still waiting. Official word. Cleveland Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski, Cleveland Browns general manager Andrew Berry have both been signed to extensions. Now, if you remember back in January of 2020, Andrew Berry was the first hire of what was this new regime. Andrew had been with the Browns for a while, had gone off to take a step up the ladder with the Philadelphia Eagles, kind of work directly under Howie Roseman. Andrew did a fantastic job, and the Cleveland Browns went calling to basically bring back their prodigal son and have them become the general manager for their franchise. Kevin Stefanski was finishing his run as offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, had won a playoff game in New Orleans against the New Orleans Saints, got pretty dominated by the San Francisco 49ers defense in a playoff game in San Francisco that had ended the Minnesota Vikings season, and it all came together. Kevin Stefanski, brought in essentially by Andrew Berry, to become the new power duo for the Cleveland Browns starting in 2020. Now, 2020, if we all remember the COVID times. So basically, these two gentlemen got these gigs, Senior Bowl, little NFL Combine, and then all of a sudden, we even opened up free agency, even opened it up a little bit. You remember right out the bat, Conklin was one of the huge signings. Austin Hooper right out of the bat. And then the entire world changed. And everybody, including the fine folks in Berea, were confined to their homes. And we had no idea what football or any sport was going to be like going further in that 2020 year. And then summer, things starting to lighten up, and leagues found a way to open back up for business, while small. A lot of sporting events with no people in the crowd. But here was this new regime for the Cleveland Browns. New head coach, new general manager, and trying to begin their NFL careers as a general manager and as a head coach in a football season unlike either had ever been in their entire lives. I still remember the very first training camp practices that were carried on the Browns YouTube page. Nathan Segura, Josh Cribbs doing a fantastic job, basically trying to give us a play-by-play and a color commentary from practices. And it was just, you had no idea how it was all going to work. They weren't allowed to put in, not even the work, they needed the extra work because they were a new regime. It was such a limited amount of work that they were putting in. Granted, every team was as well. So you had no idea truly what you thought 2020 was going to bring as far as, would they be successful? Would they not be successful? There was a lot of hurdles without a question that duo who were tied so close together, obviously, were, how they were going to do. How is this team going to perform? And somehow, some way, a first-time head coach and a first-time general manager put together a miraculous 2020 season that led to the final Sunday of the regular season, the Cleveland Browns clinching a playoff berth against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but also clinching to go to Pittsburgh the following week to play the Pittsburgh Steelers. Unfortunately, Coach Kevin Stefanski was, a spectator at home, just like we all were for that playoff game. But the Cleveland Browns won that game in Pittsburgh and started to shift the tide of this was no longer going to be considered the butt of everybody's NFL jokes. It was not going to be the, here insert Cleveland Browns punchline here. They put out a product that played hard every single week. They put out a product that had truly players that you could appreciate, that you looked up to, that cared about the city, that cared about the franchise, and just carried themselves like professionals. And that hadn't been the case. I've only been here since 2017. Some of you have all been here your entire lives. And you know what it was like. You know what it was like when that franchise was ripped away from you. And then basically they gave it back to you. But here you were, a franchise that had some roots, had some stability. Now, essentially, you were just an expansion franchise in 1999. You made the playoffs once before 2020. Now, you go back to just 2023, and Coach Kevin Stefanski wins his second NFL Head Coach of the Year award, twice in 4 years. Andrew Berry just continues to pump out a solid roster year in, year out, whether it is through the draft, whether it is through free agency, whether it is through trades, and there have certainly been some dynamic additions to this roster done through trades. The quarterback, not going to talk about that now, but Amari Cooper move that looked oh so splendid at the time. The high expectations of what could be for Jerry Jeudy. This duo has just been an incredible duo for this franchise. It has changed the way this city is viewed. It certainly changes the way the franchise is viewed. You have people now talking about the Cleveland Browns and how they expect them to go to the playoffs for a second straight season. The Cleveland Browns made a very, very smart move in 2020. They made an even smarter move here today in 2024. Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, both signed to contract extensions. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Nobody go anywhere. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You want to bet on the NBA Finals? You want to bet on the Stanley Cup Finals? FanDuel has got you hooked up. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. Of course, we appreciate every single one of you that make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. If you are not part of the everyday crowd by now, you need to change that immediately. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. Cleveland Browns have extended head coach Kevin Stefanski, have extended general manager Andrew Berry. Now, this, when it all started, Coach had been a pretty talked about name as far as becoming a head coach in the NFL. And I guess he was probably about 38 years old. Andrew was about 33 when the two of these got hired. The two of these gentlemen got hired in 2020. Coach came over, and again, we talk about how difficult the 2020 season was. Nobody knew if there was going to be a 2020 season. Was it going to be abbreviated? How is it going to work? Were there ever going to be people in the crowds? But Coach came in and identified that there were some strengths with the offensive unit of the Cleveland Browns. He identified the fact that he had a really good offensive line. He identified the fact that he had an all caliber, top shelf running back. Had a quarterback who was great as a rookie in 2018, had a lot of transgressions and missteps on the field in 2019. But in 2020, a lot of play action, using the strengths of what was an incredible offensive line, Cleveland Browns found a way to put up points and put up a lot of points. You remember that game in Dallas in 2020? And I remember all the area writers, had Browns lose by 10 points or more, 2 touchdowns, whatever. And the Browns went into the Star and beat them around. And that's when you really said, wow, this isn't just an aberration. This isn't a good couple of weeks. These two guys running this franchise know what the heck they're doing. And I go back even to then in the earliest press conferences. And this even led up to that summer of 2020. And the thing, and you remember, oh, well, watch the film, or I didn't get to see that yet. The thing, and I said it back then, and I know my Locked On Browns everydayers remember, it didn't matter. Like if you closed your eyes and you just listened to the verbiage, whether it was Andrew Berry speaking, whether it was Kevin Stefanski speaking, it was uniformed. It was the same talk. It wasn't the typical, try to make a media headline. It was stuff that you heard from other sports franchises when their bosses spoke, their head coaches spoke, their general managers spoke. You didn't hear this with anybody who was affiliated with the Cleveland Browns. And they talked about identifying talent, identifying personalities and persons, and making sure that they were taking the gambles on the correct people. And it just continued to flow and flow. 2020, you go to the playoffs, you beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. Certainly, so much was thought to be going into 2021. Baker, it's hurt right out the gate. Never the same. To his discredit, probably tried to gut his way through it when he shouldn't have. Proceeded to take even more of a beating. The season just got more and more spiraling out of control. The whole Odell Beckham Jr. selfish nonsense. That wide receiver core you had that was Odell and Landry, they just weren't getting it done. It just wasn't working out the same. Jarvis was so banged up trying to give this team everything he had. Nick, sure, was still a constant. The defense in 2020 was terrible. Everybody thought the defense in 21 was going to be better. It wasn't. Technically, the 2020 defense was better. So they had 1 year of greatness in their first year. And then all of a sudden, there was a lot of adversity in that second year. And certainly a lot of fans, and I know, come on now, I read it all. I know a lot of you guys thought, oh no, here we go again. The old, the water ball line. Oh no, we suck again. And then you get to, early 2022. You make that amazing trade for Amari Cooper. But who's going to be the quarterback? Because we all knew it wasn't going to be Bake. Unfortunately, I was a Baker guy. Still am. They eventually get the deal done, make the huge, tremendous move with so much draft investment, so much financial investment into bringing Deshaun Watson to Cleveland. Now, keep in mind, and look, I understand Deshaun's case is probably a little bit different with what he was going through, obviously. But when is the last time that one of the top stars in the NFL, whether they were available in free agency or available in a trade where, wink, wink, they were most likely telling you where they were going to go and what deal and what trade they were going to accept. When is the last time that said player in that situation said, yeah, I'm going to Cleveland? Absolutely. And it has something to do with the persona of both men. Certainly, the fact that they are younger in terms of general manager age and head coach age certainly had something to do with it. So you get that move and you pull it off and you get Deshaun here. And sadly, originally you're thinking you've only got Deshaun out for the first 6 weeks. That quickly turns to 11. And all of a sudden, your hopes for that season come a little dire. They did. Jacoby Brissett for 11, and, you maybe needed Deshaun to come in for those final 6, and most likely he was going to have to play flawless football for this team to get back to the playoffs. And Jacoby did a good enough job. If he had done a little better, maybe. You got Deshaun in. You saw rust, which after 16, 11, after 27 games off the field, you expected. And now there were questions. Was it the right move? If it wasn't going to work in 2023, wasn't successful, where was that going to put your head coach and your general manager? And so last all season was a tough spot for the Browns, and certainly the 2023 season probably became even tougher than they anticipated. But when you put faith and, you put your success in the hands of two guys who are truly committed to their crafts, who are the hardest of workers, who are the highest caliber of gentlemen there is, usually that's going to pan out for you. And we'll talk a little bit about how did just that in 2023 here in a second. Everybody, appreciate you for being along for the ride. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. Look, if you want to get into the NBA Finals, whether it's in Dallas or whether it's in Boston, I got a place for you to check out. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. People get nervous. They want to sell the tickets. Nobody wants to eat them. It's a great chance to sneak in and swipe. Killer last-minute deals, all at prices. You get a view from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can use flash deals where you save even more with the exclusive in-app deal on select seats ahead of the game or event. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where your seat is, your location, what kind of sight lines you have, and the Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. The Cleveland Browns have extended head coach Kevin Stefanski and general manager Andrew Berry. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. If you are not part of the everyday crowd of our Locked On Browns, make a new plan, stand, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. I'm excited. Now, as many of you know, when I took over in 2017, I took over to cover what eventually became an 0-16 season. And then there was that 2018 draft. Baker, Denzel, Nick Chubb. And then all of a sudden, that Thursday night game against the New York Jets, you tied week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You lost a heartbreaker in week 2 down in New Orleans. Then the Jets came to town week 3. Tyrod Taylor, unfortunately, goes down early. But now the bake show. And all of a sudden, that was some of the exciting things. Didn't lead to playoffs. And then 2020, when we had no idea. We truly had no idea. And all of a sudden, there was a Cleveland Browns team on the field week in, week out that played with heart, played hard, didn't have stupid mental mistakes, didn't have stupid penalties. They showed up and they played 11 as one on the offensive side of the ball and on the defensive side of the ball. And you got to see, and you really had a good idea early, that all of a sudden, this franchise was not the same old franchise. Same old Browns didn't exist anymore. They had turned a corner. And it certainly is due to the leadership of Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. Now, I had talked about, how difficult last offseason was because, now you had Deshaun and it was, full go. And that's where you got guys to commit to your team. You got a Dalvin Tomlinson. You took a roll of the dice on a Maurice Hurst that turned out to be a really, really good move for you. Juan Thornhill left the Kansas City Chiefs with 2 Super Bowl rings and said, yeah, I'll sign with the Browns. I'm in. You had a player like Zadarius Smith come over in a trade. You had guys who now wanted to come play for the Cleveland Browns and started off pretty good. You win week 1 against Cincinnati Bengals. Week 2, a couple of stupid turnovers and a terrible, terrible injury cost you a game in Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football. Week 3, you respond with a big victory over the Tennessee Titans. Then your starting quarterback is in and out of the lineup. And then your starting quarterback leads a miraculous come from behind victory in Baltimore, of all places, against the Ravens, and is flawless in the second half, 14 of 14, no turnovers. You beat the Baltimore Ravens on the road, and was probably the high moment for Deshaun Watson. And certainly for Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, who are so instrumental in bringing him in here. And then you find out a couple of days later, and I still remember when Mary Kay Cabot put the tweet out, because it was so small and generic and limited in words, maybe 5 words. I literally thought Mary Kay had been hacked. But then within a few minutes, we all found out that Deshaun Watson's 2023 season was over. And now, what was this head coach and general manager going to do? You had a 5th-round rookie quarterback in Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who a lot of people liked, but thought we're probably never going to get him see him play much for the Cleveland Browns. You had P.J. Walker, who had a miraculous victory over the San Francisco 49ers. But now it was these guys every week. These were your quarterbacks. They came back that following week. DTR the start. Kid fights his way, plays really, really tough, and himself has a really, really incredible closing drive in the 4th quarter to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers at home, being led with the play calling duties from Coach Kevin Stefanski. But PJ wasn't the guy. And it wasn't a question of whether or not DTR could be the guy. There was too much invested into that season. And with both these guys' jobs on the line, they had to come up with something to close out the regular season and hopefully secure a playoff berth. They call on an old Raven, Joe Flacco. And Joe had worked out. Joe had been in for, first week was, on the practice squad at the time. And all you heard from anybody at Browns practices is this ball's humming. Joe Flacco has still got all of his arm strength. And again, just like in 2020, another miraculous run starts in 2023. We all talked about how many games they were going to play in December, and most of those games were winnable. But, we've heard that term winnable games in the Cleveland Browns for years, right? But no. Win. Knocking them off. Flacco's throwing the ball all over the place. Sometimes throwing some interceptions. That's fine. But if you throw for 300 yards a game, I don't think anybody cares about that. You're throwing a couple of interceptions. And now all of a sudden, there it was, that Thursday night game. Ironically enough, Thursday night game against the Jets. Win. Clinch the playoffs. And Coach Stefanski clinches his 2nd Coach of the Year in 4 seasons. Pretty miraculous. And you knew at the time, and it certainly didn't have to wait until June, but sometimes things work out. But these 2 men get their just dessert. They get to remain here and try to see it all the way through. 2 playoffs in 4 years is great. 3 playoffs in 5 is great. Can you get to an AFC championship? Can you maybe get to a Super Bowl? These men have unfinished business, and they're going to continue to go to work for this franchise. It has been a joy to cover them. They're just great, great men. They're great at what they do. They carry themselves like absolute 110% professionals. It has been a joy to cover these two men. It truly has. I thank them. My pockets have more money in it because of the success of the Cleveland Browns and Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. So, gentlemen, thank you. And for you fans, this is what we've been waiting for a long, long time. To the Berry family, to the Stefanski family, it's really difficult to have a family and be involved in professional sports. Their kids get to grow in their communities, stay in their communities, start to put their own foundation down as far as staying in the same schools, having the same friends, maybe starting their own athletic careers. It's a really, really good day for the Cleveland Browns. And it was all about a couple of moves they made in January 2020. Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, both officially signed to contract extensions with the Cleveland Browns. The best days have been 20 through 23. Hopefully the even better days are ahead between 2024 and beyond. In Berry and Stefanski, we trust. I am Jeff Lloyd, your host here at Locked On Browns. I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd is a bunch of filthy animals, but they're my filthy animals. And I suggest you join the filthy animals and subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on ELOB. Let's go Browns.